If you're a business looking for tools for web-based communications and you want to know what to buy, what to look at, well, the first thing is you look at webcasting or webinars and figuring out what's right for you. In this video today, we're going to go through the differences and making a smart choice, the choice that makes sense. And making sense will save you time and money. So let's go through these. The two most popular methods of virtual communication are webinars and webcasts. Yet there are some similarities, but there are more dissimilarities. So let's dive into the data and differences and similarities so you can make this decision. A webinar is a live interactive presentation over the internet. That's the definition of it. When you go and look it up, and there it is. Now, most of the time I use personally webinars, and I'll tell you why as we go through this. And it's a transmission of information, communication to a group of listeners. Between the speaker and the audience, and oftentimes you have a co-host on a webinar. Somebody that is hosting me as the speaker, or I'm hosting somebody else who's a speaker on my platform. Also with a webinar, this allows you to interact with the attendees. You interact, and how do you do that? With text chats, with maybe surveys, the hands can go up, with polls, and you can respond in real time in a webinar. And most webinars, the platforms can handle up to 1,000 people. After that, you run into challenges, but most can handle that. And usually the webinars that I run are 100 to 500, sometimes larger. Also, with a webinar, the hosts and attendees can connect through their mobile devices or their desktop versions in order to interact with the host and or the presenter. And webinars are best suited for the objective to connect to a live audience and interact with them in real time. Why is that? Because you can sell. Whereas the other version, which we're going to get to, has its difference. And also a webinar, you typically want to get them involved while you're conducting this live. But there is an option for them to watch later with a version called a replay. Now let's talk for a second about a webcast. It's a broadcast that is pre-recorded, and it's a presentation over the internet, but it's canned. The transmission of the information is one way only, meaning you don't get a response from the attendees, from speaker to audience. It is strictly one way. And the webcasts are not time constrained. So meaning a webinar is scheduled at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. That's the time you got to show up because it's live interaction. Whereas a webcast, you can go and click on a link and listen to it at any time. Key distinction right there. And they are live streamed. The webcast is live streamed like Facebook uses the platform of YouTube, Facebook, disseminating this information in a one-way format, and it is embedded into a site. And webcasts are used for conferences. If you're dispensing information to a large group of people, let's say you're putting on a big event with 100,000 people coming to a conference center, you would use a webcast, not a webinar, because it can't support it. And it also allows you to bring in a panel of people with the webcast, and it be broadcasted to people that are not looking at it live, because there might be various time zones, and a webcast is better suited for that. Now, the main difference between a webinar and a webcast are, number one, its features. Webinars have different objectives and both provide different features. Webinars are designed for interaction and engagement. Their platforms include features like text-based chats, as we mentioned, file sharing, screen sharing, which is a key differentiator, live Q&A. And this is a big difference. Whereas in webcast, it is one way, as we mentioned, presentation driven, and don't support interaction because there can be too many people, too many time zones. Webcast platforms allow a limited scope of engagement with polls and surveys. Not live interaction, but you can fill out a poll and a survey while you listen to the webcast for later publication, and that way you could reveal what the findings were from these. The audience size is limited to 1,000 people, typically on a webinar, whereas a webcast has an unlimited number. And webinars are designed for interaction, for live interaction. So the hosts can engage with the attendees. Thousands of people using these features at once might be difficult if you're in the webinar platform. Webcasts allow for a broader broadcast, and there's little to no engagement except for the polls or the surveys, as I mentioned. They do not incorporate additional interactive features, and mass viewing becomes difficult with a webinar, whereas webcasts sometimes involve in-studio viewers with an online audience, as is the case with TED Talks. TED Talks will allow people to come in and engage with someone watching, and it's just for the polled surveys, but you can't ask questions with a TED speaker at that time. Webinars, on the other hand, are meant solely for an online audience live. Execution. There is a marked difference in the way you would execute a virtual event. So let's say the three things that a webinar focuses on: dissemination of information, number two, interaction with the audience, and number three, the important one, webinars are there for people to buy. If I'm running a webinar, my objective is to disseminate information that's useful to the attendees and eventually sell them, persuade them to buy based on the information for what's next. Questions can be answered better on a webinar in a chat room. Oftentimes people are opened up and they can voice it orally so everybody hears what their question is in addition to the chat box. It allows much greater engagement. Along with presenting, the host of the webinar uses various other tools and a comprehensive way to connect and sell. Webcast presentations, by contrast, are different. As I mentioned, the communication is unidirectional, one way, except for polls and surveys. Execution of a webcast is to disseminate information, and there's one way. And let me just share number 4, the levels of interaction between the two. Number 1, webinars allow the interaction. The audience gets the opportunity to participate in polls and surveys while also networking with fellow attendees. You do get to meet people and make connections with chat features inside webinars within intra-attendee possibilities, if that is opened up. Like when I use Zoom, sometimes people connect, and I was on a Zoom call last night, they chat within the presentation. You can encourage that. It's a way of networking. It allows people to make a deeper connection. And webcasts involve very little to no participation with the other audience members. The host of a webcast presents information, viewers take it in, and the flow of information, as I said, is just one way. So the good and the bad. Both webinars and webcasts are great tools to conduct virtual communications. You don't have to be live, but neither is without its limitations. As far as webinars are concerned, they're interactive, flexible, but limited by the amount of people that can attend. And not all webinars are recorded and not used for future reference, whereas webcasts can be pulled down, but it's usually there in an evergreen format, meaning you can access it any time. And that is one of the benefits. And it affects the experience of attendees. Webcasts, though, are great in terms of repeatability as well as sharing. They are easier to access because they've already been embedded in the site. And here's the big difference between the two. Webinars can fail because they're live. Technology can disrupt. Now, there was a webinar I was doing with a man that owns ClickFunnels, the CEO of ClickFunnels, named Russell Brunson. We were using GoToWebinar. This is before Zoom came around or wasn't even known. And I couldn't get into my own webinar. There was a host. I was the one that was going to sell with Russell to our group of people. I couldn't get in because I had to have the latest version of Safari downloaded in order to get into GoToWebinar. That was the last time I ever used GoToWebinar as a webinar platform, because who knows how much money that cost me in hassle. I was on the phone with their support while this webinar was taking place, and I didn't get to join the webinar till it was over. That's how disruptive it was. And that pain point caused me to switch to other webinar platforms. It is so important. You are subject to the technology that you're using with a webinar. It has to be updated. No one informed me of this. And this is why I will never use GoToWebinar again. And that's what happened with Russell. The one time we conducted a joint webinar together. So webcasts are pre-recorded. There aren't any technical issues because you test it before you upload it, and it's there. It's working. It's always there. Whereas webcasts fall short with the interactivity, the reliability is there. So you trade one for the other, reliability versus interactivity. There is a lot less flexibility with the webcast, because if you have to change one aspect of it, you got to go back and change and redo the whole deal. Whereas a webinar does allow you to go in and make some edits. If you like these tips, comment below. Ask me if there's anything else you would like me to cover, and I'd be happy to respond. These are the differences that I have found in my years of running live webinars and participating and creating webcasts. We'll see you in the next video.